Honourable Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, Professor Michael Devry, distinguished former directors, esteemed dignitaries, and my dear colleagues, a very warm welcome to the Golden Jubilee Inaugural of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. Today marks 50 years of NIPFP's contribution to research, policy advocacy, and capacity building in the fields of public finance and macroeconomics in India, an occasion to reflect on a remarkable journey and to look ahead with a renewed purpose. We are deeply honored to have with us today Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, Honourable Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, Government of India. While Srimati Sitharaman needs no introduction, her career speaks to a memorable record of public service. Since assuming charge as Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister in 2019, she has presented 9 consecutive union budgets, the highest by any finance minister in the history of independent India. Under her stewardship, India achieved the landmark of becoming the 5th largest economy in the world. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she headed the Economic Response Task Force, navigating the nation through an unprecedented economic challenge with measured and decisive policy action. Prior to this, in September 2017, she was appointed India's first full-time women defense minister, a significant milestone in the country's history. She had earlier served as Minister of State with independent charge for commerce and industry from 2014 to 2017. A member of BJP's national executive since 2008 and the party's former national spokesperson, she has been an influential voice in shaping its economic and political discourse. Ma'am, we are truly privileged to have you with us on this momentous occasion. I now invite our director, Dr. R. Kavita Rao, to welcome the Honourable Minister and deliver the welcome address.
I'd like to begin by welcoming all of you to NIPFP on this interesting and momentous occasion of the institution completing 50 years, we'd like to say, in service to the nation. The institute was established in 1976 at the joint initiative of Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue being our major supporting department, Planning Commission, state governments, and distinguished academicians as an independent non-profit academic institution. Over the years, in this 50 years long journey, the institute has emerged as a premier think tank in India in the field of public finance and macroeconomics. We started as an institution dealing largely with public finance, but over the years, given the increasing demands and the evolving economic scenario, the institute has had the privilege of expanding its scope of research to include macro, and in more recent times, we have had the opportunity to contribute towards green taxation, towards carbon pricing, towards climate-sensitive fiscal policy. This whole journey has been an interesting and rewarding journey for us, and we hope that we have been able to contribute meaningfully to the policy discourse. The Institute has been a part of some significant policy reforms over the course of the years. To mention a few, the Tax Reforms Committee headed by Dr. Chalaya, work on value-added tax and GST, which took a lot of inputs from the Institute. The FSLRC, the Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission, too had its secretariat in the Institute and evolved through a lot of discussions and contributions by members of the Institute. Finally, inputs to a variety of, to various finance commissions over the years, which helped shape the debate on fiscal federalism within the country. We have had the privilege of having eminent economists and policymakers like Professor Dr. Haksar, Dr. Lakdawala, Dr. Kusro, Dr. Rangarajan, Dr. Kelkar, and most recently, Dr. Urjit Patel as chairpersons for the Institute. And we've benefited from the guidance of our former directors, Dr. Amresh Bagchi. The founding director was Dr. Chalaya, followed by Dr. Bagchi, Dr. Parthasarathi Shom, Dr. Lahiri, Dr. Rao, who's present here, Dr. Rathin Roy, who too is present, and Dr. Pinaki Chakravarti. So we have had a long journey, and we've also had the opportunity to engage in capacity building for both government officials and expanded the scope of capacity building to bring in teaching on teaching public finance in Indian universities. Recently, we've introduced a doctoral program as well for PhD students undertaking research in public finance. So in all of its long journey, today, NIPFP reaffirms its commitment to its founding wisdom, producing independent, non-partisan, high-quality research to strengthen public finance systems and support India's policy transformation. And therefore, it's a great honor for us to have the Honourable Finance Minister here with us today. We'd like her to share with us what she sees as a role for an institution like ours, how we could be of effective support for activities, for policy making that the government seeks to undertake. We look forward to your inaugural address, ma'am, and we hope you will give us some direction on how we should look at the world going forward. Welcome to NIPFP. I invite you to deliver your address.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to be amidst you, particularly when you're marking the Golden Jubilee celebrations. So Dr. Kavita Rao, the director, distinguished faculty, researchers, and academic participants. It's a privilege, as I said earlier, to be here as we celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. The director observed that this institution was formed in 1976, amidst the dark days of the emergency, when freedoms were stifled and public finances were left unchecked and unaccounted for. It was an era when India's combined fiscal deficit had begun its long ascent toward unsustainable levels, eventually necessitating the structural reforms of 1991. So in that era, where the government exerted the strong direct influence over the economy, the institution was created to bring the discipline of evidence and analysis to the management of India's public finances and act as an intellectual vanguard. 50 years later, while there has been a monumental change in the life and breadth of the Indian economy, the mandate still finds relevance, and the importance of NIPFP has been more consequential in steering the intellectual ship of the policy making across the country, moving from abstractions of academic literature to the real world policy imperatives. Because public finance lies at the heart of the nation's growth and indeed in its transformation, this Golden Jubilee celebration event is the perfect occasion to ponder and to chart the course for India's march to a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. Ma'am, you mentioned about how this institution can serve and what is the future direction and so on. Vikasit Bharat is before us. We have external challenges. Not to say there are few internal challenges, the primary one being the predictability of the monsoon on which the entire Indian economy depends, not just agriculture, but every other industry as well. So it is in that sense, I think you have a very unenviable role, but yet a very significant role to play, I would think. Let me begin with the question having profound consequences. Why does a good public finance matter for a nation? Why does good public finance matter at all for a nation? Traditional theories, whether it's Musgrave and Musgrave, for instance, assert that the government has a tripartite role to play in an economy. That is the first one, where to ensure that the market outcomes remain just, fair, and equitable, and also inclusive, the government redistributes the income through taxes and subsidies. Then the second one is amidst shocks of various kinds, and in the recent past, we've had a few of them of significant size and impact. So amidst shocks, to smoothen the business cycles, government helps bring resilience and broader macroeconomic stability. And a third one, because private provisioning of public goods causes underproduction, the government steps in to ensure allocative efficiency. So each of these functions require resources. How those resources are raised and how they are deployed and how the gap between revenues and expenditure is managed, this is the domain of public finance. But more than technical exercise, public finance is at its core a statement of political economy that is mired with normative considerations of what a society values, what it is willing to pay for, who bears the fiscal burden, and what legacy it leaves for future generations. These are very critical questions that all of us have constantly got to ask and answer. A sound public finance policy has been emphasized in our nation's statecraft and political theory. I'm going back to talking about just a line about Arthashastra. Kosha Purva Sarvarambha Tasmat Purvam Kosham Aveksheta. What does it actually convey? Just one brilliant one line. All undertakings and projects depend upon the treasury, that is the finance. Therefore, one should first attend to treasury itself, to the treasury itself, to the finance itself. So you first take care of ensuring your finances, plan for its ways in which it's going to be expended, and make sure, therefore, all undertakings and projects succeed. So you begin with finance to execute a better run economy. So Kautilya stated that the strength of a kingdom is in its security, administration, and public welfare. This is entirely dependent on a stable, well-managed economy and state finance. So going further, Kautilya also emphasized the need to balance between two things. Kosha Pravritti, which is growth in your treasury. And the next, Janapada Rakshana, protection of the people's livelihoods. So it is important that these two are taken care of. And I can't but recall during COVID, literally every day the question was save lives before livelihood, but livelihood is essential. So make sure you give support mechanism. You make sure that there is enough forbearance offered to them, that livelihoods are not lost, but yes, life is more important. So this critical balance was a biggest challenge any, I would think, government would face. And that's what was faced by all of us. And I suppose every government all over the world. Livelihood, life, balance the two with the resources that you have. So in modern thought, while the Keynesian theory says that the government spending has multiplier effects, each rupee of public expenditure, particularly capital expenditure, generates more than a rupee of GDP. The Ricardian equivalence reminds us that excessive borrowing today merely shifts the tax burden to tomorrow's citizens. So the intergenerational repaying burden that our people will have to face, and this is something which I'll come a bit later when I'm talking about Niti Aayog study on how states are managing their finances. So absolutely relevant, and there is no difference between the thought process which existed centuries ago and which is now critically also being felt. You had very many serious thinkers of economics talking about it. So it's so relevant that we every now and then revert back to the thought, the theory itself, much before we execute something. Therefore, prudent public finance management entails that we maximize the multiplier effect by directing spending to productive uses, keeping in mind the concerns of intergenerational equity through maintaining debt sustainability. Do you mind if I move over this? It's a bit too low. Further, to foreclose avenues for rent seeking, which is very important for an emerging economy like India, particularly when generations have seen acute rent seeking leading to stagnation or growth being hampered. So to foreclose avenues for rent seeking, the policy needs to have an inbuilt mechanism of transparency, accountability, and institutional checks. This is why good public finance is not merely good governance or good economics, it is good governance rooted in good ethics. Before I elaborate that a bit further, it is important to contextualize the present global landscape we are operating in. Because the world in the past year provides the starkest possible illustration of why fiscal prudence matters. The year 2025 was monumental in more ways than we initially thought. Trade fragmentation has introduced severe uncertainty into global supply chains. This led to sharp downward revisions in global growth forecasts, but the year ended more optimistically than previously perceived, particularly for India. This current year is even more challenging as we move from a landscape of shocks to one of permanent volatility. The escalation of Middle East conflict has evolved from a regional security concern into a systemic tremor, threatening a vital arteries of global energy and hardening the lines of new multipolar world order. While the acronym VUCA, VUCA, was coined in the late 1980s to describe a post-Cold War world, I fear it has found its truest and the most unsettling relevance in the last decade. I wish we could relegate this term to the history books, but yet it has become the only honest vocabulary for a present reality. It is what it is, a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity all at once. So global public debt has surged to approximately 106 trillion US dollars, exceeding 95% of the global GDP itself. As per the IMF, the United States has a debt to GDP ratio of 125% in 2025, with Japan at a staggering 235%. Many advanced economies that spent decades running expansionary fiscal policies now find themselves with severely constrained policy space precisely when they need it most. Against this backdrop, India continues to stand out. Our general government debt to GDP ratio, which includes the state's debt, at approximately 81%, is the lowest among major economies after Germany. More importantly, India is the only major economy where the IMF projects this ratio to fall significantly. So IMF projects this ratio to fall significantly to 75.8% by 2030. While the debt outlook for the advanced economies such as the US, China, Germany, and others is projected only to worsen. Our external debt to GDP ratio stands at just 19.1% as of September 2025, one of the lowest in the emerging market world. India's foreign exchange reserves at over 688 US billion as of March 31st, that is 2026, just a few days ago, provide import cover for approximately 11 months. And I would think that's fairly a substantial buffer to hold. This is not an involuntary outcome, as many in the opposition, in the political domain, I mean, many in the opposition would wrongly believe or would want to say that in such a word, but it is a wrong belief. It's not an involuntary outcome. It is the product of deliberate, sustained, and sometimes politically difficult choices made over the years of fiscal management. It was made possible because of the agile policies, stable leadership of this government, with a singular focus on ensuring India achieves Godspeed progress. For a rapidly progressing economy like ours, sound fiscal management is a policy imperative. And in this front, we have undergone a massive structural transformation of public finance over the past decade. Under Honourable Prime Minister Modi, we have credibly changed the course of the fiscal policy from consumption-led deficits, which was marked during the era before 2014, to productive investment-led consolidation. It's a distinct change in the character of how public finance is managed. I've come to appreciate one thing, a particular dimension of public finance that receives insufficient attention in both academic world and in policy debates. Not merely on what to spend or how much to spend, but when to spend. The timing of public expenditure is itself a macroeconomic instrument, temporal efficiency, if you may want to call it. We have strongly pushed just-in-time releases for our budgetary allocations. We have leveraged the public finance management, financial management system, the PFMS, in its fullest potential. Through the PFMS, the SNA Sparsh model for release of funds under centrally sponsored schemes was brought in. It marked a transition from a credit push, that is a priori release of funds to various implementing agency, to a debit pull based fund transfer system in which a debit to the central pool is triggered only when the implementing agency issues a payment instruction on the system. It doesn't start before. By design, therefore, SNA Sparsh can pull funds in real time to the end beneficiary's account, saving resources for the Treasury. Similarly, the Treasury single nodal account facilitates just-in-time release of funds to autonomous bodies. This eliminates funds remaining unutilized for a long time. It has resulted in substantial interest costs for the center. India is also sharing these digital public goods and public financial management, the PFMS tools, with countries across Africa, Latin America, and Asia through MOUs, pilot implementations, technical missions, and capacity building programs. Just to give you an idea of what I'm saying in terms of numbers. In the year 24-25, mother sanctions, as they would call, which will be for umbrella sanction under which you may have several programs. Mother sanctions was 24,369 crore. And how much was actually utilized, meaning pulled and utilized? 13,850. I understand even today, 11,000 crores of that mother sanction still remains there available for the states to use it. A few months of, being parked is not something which I would be worried about. We didn't want parking for a longer duration, but this is tolerable. 25-26. What was the mother sanction? 1,14,615 crores. Sorry. Mother sanction was 1,15,243 crores. And how much was actually released and utilized? 1,14,615. Where was it earlier? 13,000 odd. It's gone to 1,14,000 and very close to the mother sanction. So unspent money, again in that head, still lies with the states. So they're not scraping for the resources till the next project pull happens. So 68,000 crores still lies with them, which will have to be accounted for the last year, since we are already into April. The point which I want to make is when you're talking of debt to GDP, borrowing will have to be smart. You need the money, you need to borrow, but it can't be that you borrow, park it in some projects, some enterprises, some departments, or in state's account, and keep paying the interest here, whereas that's not getting utilized. The technology interface which was brought in by the ministry has actually been very, very useful in this particular matter of money reaching just in time. And states which were initially very hesitant have rapidly moved in, seeing the benefit of such a program. It doesn't deny, you just need to keep pulling by putting in more of your schemes and your little bit of share from the states. So India is also sharing this with many of the African countries, Latin American countries, and other countries in Asia, all of whom want to benefit from the way in which technology has helped in managing public finance. So our government has prioritized transparency in budgeting practices and numbers. In FY 2020-2021, the government repaid all outstanding National Small Savings Fund loans provided to FCI in lieu of food subsidy by providing additional budgetary support. Why do I have to say this? I said it is important to have not just accountability, but transparency. Our budget numbers are transparent. Our document is much more open a document now. Off-budget funded schemes are being proactively disclosed in the budget documents. Additionally, steps have been taken to settle extra budgetary resources and liabilities which come out of it wherever prepayable is feasible. Budget allocations for key infrastructure, such as Ministry of Road and Transport, Highways, Road and Railways, have been significantly enhanced, and therefore we expect the ripple effects to help, the multiplier effects to help us. In 22-23, I'm probably tracing through every one of the budget as to how accountability and transparency has been brought in. 22-23, we have limited the number of supplementary demands for grants to 2, now presented during winter and budget sessions. This has made substantive improvements in the process of budget estimation and improved financial discipline. The distinction between the plan and non-plan expenditure created a distortion in the perception of the two types of allocations. Therefore, that was done away with. In 2017-18, in that budget cycle, the budget cycle was shifted to 1st February instead of the last working day of February. This has improved administrative efficiency and delivery of schemes as ministries have the full budget available from the beginning of the financial year, that is 1st April. And that is why we find one other step that we've taken has really borne very good results. And that is, we have largely curtailed the March rush to spend. That is, spending behavior of the ministries and states now have to be strictly enforcing quarterly limits of budget outlays to each of these ministries, usually 25% per quarter, and the last quarter alone, we allow 33%. Through this, we now have a more even distribution of expenditure. That impulse continues throughout the year, not just in March. We've also improved quality of expenditure, prioritizing on capital expenditure from 1.6% of GDP in 2014-15, capital expenditure has risen to 3.1% of the GDP now in 26-27, and effective capital expenditure is actually at 4.4% of the GDP. So in absolute terms, this means an increase from 2 lakh crore to 12.22 lakh crore, more than 6-fold increase in nominal terms, which has huge multiplier effect. Ma'am, I'm elaborating and I hope it's okay. It is clear that a prudent fiscal policy is not just about austerity or cutting back expenditure. It is also spending the resources in an efficient and transparent manner. Thank you. This prudent management has strengthened India's macroeconomic stability, resulting in credit rating upgrades from agencies such as Morningstar DBRS and S&P, and also R&I in 2025. So it's also important to note that good public finance policy improves the counter-cyclical capacity of fiscal policy, especially the ability to lean against the wind in economic downturn. Today, many countries with high debt and large deficits have no room to maneuver, and they face a grim choice between austerity and instability. On the contrary, India has fiscal space, room to maintain our capex program, room for RBI to cut rates, and room to offer targeted support to affected sectors. This is the dividend of a decade of fiscal prudence and discipline. This is the strategic value of fiscal prudence that pays dividends across decades. Therefore, we have to be able to reduce the excise duty on diesel, and we have been able to reduce the excise duty on diesel and petrol. Specific exemptions were given on critical petrochemical products and SEZs to operate in the DTA. All three major steps taken very recently. Now, revenue side steps for sound public finance. I think it's equally important because many people immediately think of public expenditure, how the government spends money, when they hear public finance. However, it is also about how government gets the money to spend. Without a robust revenue system, the revenue stream, the government's ability to function would be purely theoretical. State must raise money in ways that are fair, growth compatible, macroeconomically useful, and practically enforceable. Also, revenue mobilization is not just tax rates, it's also administration. How the state reduces compliance friction for honest taxpayers while improving detection and deterrence for evasion. India's revenue side architecture has undergone a paradigm shift over the last decade, where the system once relied on high taxes, narrow bases, discretionary assessments, and adversarial enforcement. It now rests on 4 pillars: simplification, technology, trust, and transparency. So the major revenue side steps, I would only flag them, I'm not getting into details. GST was introduced in 2017. The taxpayer base has more than doubled to 1.46 crore entities, and gross collections in FY26 crossed 22.27 lakh crores. And today, I think it was in Economic Times, I found a piece which was absolutely to the point as to what GST has done to this country and actually what it has done to the states in making them get more revenue. But equally, that article highlights how some of the states have been a bit laid back in generating their own state's resources. It's a piece worth reading. I'm not quoting it here, but I think it was a very good analysis of where the GST has brought the country. So faceless assessment and appeals, 2019-20, New Income Tax Act 2025, Customs Reform Budget 2026-27, which was announced, and it is ongoing. There are more to come. Use of information technology in GST and income tax, reducing tax disputes via Vivad Se Vishwas, and also increasing the monetary threshold for appeals. Vivad Se Vishwas 1.0, which was 2020, resolved 1.1 lakh direct tax disputes and mobilized 98,000 crores, over 98,000 crores. It also raised thresholds for preemptively eliminating futile government litigation, freed judicial bandwidth, and reduced the exchequer's own litigation costs. New tax regime for individuals have been brought in, better interagency and cross-border data sharing. All of them together represent a coherent fiscal philosophy. Simplify the law, lower the rates, broaden the base, deploy technology, and build trust. So both from the point of view of expenditure and from the point of tax administration, the income revenue generation, tax administration has actually been going through a lot of change for the good of the taxpayers. I come to that point which I raised earlier, states and fiscal health. It's more the view of the Niti Aayog. I'm not commenting on states' finances being the finance minister, but I see the facts also before me. But I'm relying on Niti Aayog. Sound fiscal management of the center is, whatever be it, it percolates down to the effective management practices adopted by the states as well, as states are equal partners in India's development story. This is where Niti Aayog's Fiscal Health Index, the FHI, launched in 2025, and updated annually, represents a landmark in subnational fiscal assessment. The FHI evaluates 18 major states on 5 composite dimensions: quality of expenditure, resource mobilization, revenue mobilization, fiscal prudence, debt index, and debt sustainability. States are classified as aspirational in the FHI. Those in the lowest band, that is, face a common situation. So the aspirational states, which are in the lowest band, face a common situation, and that is rising committed expenditure. Salaries, pensions, interest payments as a share of the revenue receipts. Insufficient own source revenue, high debt servicing burden, and capital expenditure that is both insufficient and unevenly distributed across the year. This is a structural trap, and it requires structural solutions, not just additional central transfers, which is what most often, even sometimes reporters in the media say, oh my God, that state requires more fund, please, can you not? They are not giving solution to the states which can help in structural correction. States need to treat the FHI not as an external imposition, but as a mirror, a transparent evidence-based reflection of their fiscal health. States that lead in the FHI are those that have made the hardest choices. What are they? Controlling committed expenditure, investing in their own revenue administration, maintaining capital expenditure even in lean years, and managing debt prudently. These choices are available to every state. But as NIPFP analyzes, your analysis have repeatedly noted, and as reflected by the FHI's findings, the deeper issue is the state's own revenue mobilization. Property tax remains heavily undercollected across most states. User charges for urban services, water, sanitation, public transport are set far below cost recovery levels. This is both an equity failure and a fiscal failure, creating permanent structural deficits that must be financed through borrowing or central transfers. When a state's balance sheet is healthy, it has the capacity to co-invest in infrastructure with private partners and to absorb economic shocks without cutting essential services. States need to be full partners in the fiscal compact. A Vikasit Bharat requires Vikasit states and Vikasit districts with healthy financial position, fiscal position, effective revenue administration, capable expenditure management systems, and accountability frameworks that translate public spending into measurable outcomes. NIPFP's State Forum initiative, with support of World Bank, is commendable. It is being used for addressing challenges faced by states and for them to share their experience in innovations, in revenue generation, and experiments undertaken for public financial management. Now I conclude without making you wonder when it's going to come to an end. A decade ago, just remember, just a decade ago, our economy was one of the fragile 5 economies. We begin the quarter of this century as the fastest growing major economy in the world. This quarter, which is the second quarter of the 21st century, we began with fiscal deficit on an unsustainable trajectory. We have brought it down to 4.4% of GDP, en route towards 50% debt to GDP by 2030-31. We began with a tax system built on suspicion. We have created one premised on trust. We moved the budget date We introduced quarterly limits. We built the TSA and we built the TSA and the PFMS ecosystem. We decriminalized commerce. We made tax assessment faceless. We created an inflation targeting framework and the institutional independence that makes it credible. These are not small achievements. They are cumulative result of thousands of decisions by the collective wisdom of the people and leadership who chose the harder, more principled path when the easier one was always available. The road to Vikasit Bharat 2047 is long and there are challenges ahead. Climate finance, subnational fiscal reform, debt management, and the fiscal implications of demographic challenge and change, but public investment return challenges, technology-led disruptions. These are all formidable. But as I stand in this room, surrounded by the finest minds in public finance, I have no doubt that we have the intellectual resources, the institutional capacity, and the national ambition to complete it. India is not merely on the move, India is on the right path. India is also set to scale new heights that were hitherto unseen. And institutions like NIPFP are among the most important reasons why. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for a very, very interesting and a very thought-provoking speech to tell us where we were and how we progress forward from here. We would love to keep you with us for much longer, but I'm sure there are other commitments on your time. So we would request you to give us a few minutes of your time to lay the foundation stone for the building that we are embarking on. And if you would be amenable, if there are people who would like a few questions, would that be, yeah? So if there's anybody who would like to ask a question, make a comment. Okay, I have one question. As someone who does a little bit of work on tax, I'm as asking you not as the finance minister, so much as the economist in you. While there's been amazing landmark transformations in the income tax system, is there a challenge in trying to expand the base in terms of number of taxpayers in the way we are designing our income tax system? In particular, if we have a small number of people who pay taxes, every so often there is a pressure to raise the exemption threshold, which in effect reduces the number of taxpayers once again. So is that a question? Is that a challenge? Or is there a different way to think about it?
Yeah, this is a question which repeatedly I'm asked, but it is true that efforts to broaden the base does take a lot of effort, and also I would think not so ideal a route. The TDSs that we came up with in several of the transactions were more to see if big expenditures which are being incurred by people who are assessees at all. And the earlier stages of AI being used in CBDT did tell us that very many such TDS payers are not even assessees. So that was one route through which we wanted to be sure that we are touching transactions which will reveal if there are people doing that kind of a big time expenditure who are assessees, and if they're not, we are not going to, as would the narrative go, we are not going to harass them, we are not going to be at their doors, but we certainly would like to send them a mail to say, this is the TDS, but TDS is no new tax, but you can align it with and reconcile it with the tax that you would pay and so on. But even TDS costs a lot of, yes, heartburn, and people get, oh, tax terrorism, more tax from this government. No, if you're a taxpayer, this is going to be anyway aligned and you'll reconcile for it. So that was one attempt where it was not for revenue reasons that the TDS were levied. It was more for tracking where this expenditure is happening, who's actually involved in it, are they paying the tax? So I'm not really waiting for the revenue coming, which comes out of TDS. I'm more waiting for them to say, look, I paid a TDS, but here's my tax assessment. This is the tax I'm required to pay. So that is one of the attempts. Similar are expenditure-related attempts to see if people are genuinely claiming expenditure that is exempted from tax. So even there, when questions are asked, no one likes tax people asking questions. But I'm sorry, I have evidence to believe the data today when you try to analyze it. You have a spider's web before you. You can go tracing to the last person, which might be the 7th or 10th person in this one particular transaction. It is easy. So you need to ask questions and then say, would you like to please come into the system? So yeah, there are efforts. But that question that you ended with makes me feel that you have assumed that I will be touching the same salaried class. No. On whom I give rebate, and further, by giving more rebates or exemptions, I'm excluding them from the tax, thereby reducing the number of people who are going to pay tax. No, I'm not looking at it from that point. I'm more looking at it giving relief for people who are repeatedly in the low end of the tax paying structure to have some relief.
My name is Govinda Rao.
Of course.
I used to be the director here. There are a number of issues, but I'll be very brief on a very minor issue, but politically very sensitive. Under the Prime Minister's Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, you are supporting somewhere about 813 million people with 5 kilograms of free food grains. But according to the Niti Aayog, our multidimensional poverty is just about 12%. Now, how do you really deal with this particular issue? Because this is going to continue for 5 years. Just start in 2024, it was this thing up to 2000. Now, there are similar other expenditures, because we always talk about taxes, but then expenditure saved is also the resource generated. My concern is that, although the 12th Finance Commission said that 6% should be the fiscal deficit target, and now we are talking about the 50% debt level target at the end of this year. They did it at the time when the household sector financial saving was just about 10%. Today, the household sector saving has come down to, in 23-24, it is 5.2%. Maybe according to the new numbers, the revision, this thing might be a little higher. So the target itself is rather in a shaky area. How do we really save in order to invest for, sort of save the future generation and invest more for the future?
Whilst I recognize that the small savings may stagnate or may come down, some other studies which have been done through various research institutions also show today the Indian small saving people who do Indian small savings are moving more towards also in retail participation in the stock markets. They're willing to take that little bit of risk, and many of them have done very well prior to this Middle East volatility and everything else. So savings today are being moved to different platforms. It's not as if savings are. Yeah. So it's an area in which various different ways in which people seem to think that they can take care of their investments and so on, or savings which transfer to be investments in markets. I'll also put it before you that every quarter this discussion happens in the ministry about referring or pitching it to Shamla Gopinath's recommendation, saying what happens to the savings rates, small saving, senior citizen saving, NSSF, and so on. We are so far away from Shamla Gopinath. And also because the interest rate itself has gone through a different level. So it is a very big dharma sankata sitting in the ministry, whether you will bring this down and cause hurt to senior citizens who are probably living on that little interest rate that they earn out of it. But we are ensuring that they don't earn less. But equally, if I just looked at the kitty of NSSF, it is from that same kitty I'm borrowing. So at a time when the interest rate regime is brought down interest, I'm giving for the welfare of the senior citizen and small savers a certain rate which is very deviated from Shamla Gopinath's recommendation. And it doesn't stop there. I have to lift and borrow from that NSSF. So for government, it is, I don't want to use the word double whammy, but it is costing me here, costing me there. So there are a lot of issues on which, in today's situation, the government has to do its duty of ensuring that small savers don't get hurt if I bring that down. At the same time, borrowing from that pool is becoming more expensive for me. But that is one way of sustaining the pool's corpus. So there are issues where if we stand outside of the government, it's very well for us to ask that question. But government, when it is sitting there, will have to attend to both sides' requirements. So yes, these are realities.
Yeah. All right. Thank you
You
so
were
much.
going to ask something.
Thank you. I'm Sabyasachi Kar, Director at the Institute of Economic Growth, but my participation here is as an ex-faculty at the NIPFP. My question is, you pointed out that we are moving from a single shock kind of scenario to a perpetual shock scenario. We know that the budgetary process is based on expectations, on assumptions made about the future. What does this perpetual shock scenario do to the budgeting process? How do we take care of unknown unknowns in the budgeting process in this new situation?
Since you're referring to the budgetary process, strictly, I think it is from the, let's say, the third quarter that we start looking at situations this year and then plan for next year's budget. The last quarter, and prior to the last quarter, all the consultations and everything. But what happened during COVID is probably what I'll fall back on now to say. It's not going to be confined to the third quarter and the fourth quarter. I'll have to constantly keep looking at what's happened today. Middle East, all our gas sources have been devastated. My sources will have to be quickly ramped up from all over the world. It's not as if they are waiting for me to go and ask them for excess supply. We'll have to get into their scheme of things and say, we need it. And in that anticipation, you're also going to have to be ready for an increased price because you're going and demanding. It's not as if it's part of the larger Brent market where your basket is just determined by so many different sources, and therefore you have a good energy mix. Also solar, wind, and renewable and so on. So it is unlike that exercise. It is an exercise where you're rushing to see who's going to give me that extra fertilizer, DAP, who's going to give me that extra gas. So much before the hit comes at our doorstep, we need to prepare and get ready. I'm happy to say I said this in the parliament also. The fertilizer situation, at least for the forthcoming Kharif, which is ongoing, is comfortable only because we have made sure that what if situation, what if the supplies are going to be difficult? What if Ukraine anyway doesn't give much? What if? And therefore we have stocked ourselves with urea, DAP, and muriate of potash. But that's no comfort. From now, I should start tendering out for Rabi. And while tendering out for Rabi, it's not the quantity which is worrying me, because there's also a lot of excess buying, people are hoarding, everything is happening. But I can't deny the farmer. But what is the issue, the challenge? When you issue the tender, what's going to be the price? The supplier is unclear, even if you found one. The insurance of shipping it over to you, logistics, the constraints. Many of the insurance companies have now refused to insure those shipping lines which come through some parts, not just Hormuz, but even Red Sea and so on. So the uncertainty is, even when you want to be prepared in advance, there are so many ifs to the question. I'm willing to give the money. I've apportioned 1 lakh crores in the budget, saying for all the exigencies which we can't anticipate. But you still tell me what is the price at which you're going to put the tender out. And unless you put it out now, with all the going around Cape of Good Hope and reaching in time for November, December, when you start giving the farmers. So these are the kind of exigencies which, even if I want to be ready, it's not in my hands. I can keep the fund, I can go for the tender, but the supplier himself is probably unclear how he would do, like you would have read in the newspapers. The gas carrying huge tankers like ships are destined to one port of call, but they are diverted at the last minute. These are not things which you anticipate. So,
all right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that very, very insightful and inspiring address. Your words have given guidance on the future of public finance policy and also the role NIPFP can play in making of Viksit Bharat 2047. As a small token of our deep appreciation and gratitude, may I request our director to kindly present a memento to the Honourable Finance Minister.
That is for today, and this is so that you remember us for a long time. It is a little heavy, so can I request you to please sit to the foundation stone? I'm told you have another meeting, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we all join the Honourable Finance Minister and proceed to the foundation stone laying ceremony?